Block. I'm the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. First, we'll confirm that all members and others anticipated to be on the agenda are present and are able to hear me. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. I see Glenn. I'm going to go in the order that I can see everybody.
I can hear you.
Very good. Thank you, Glenn. Daphne as staff, thank you very much.
Present.
Oh.
Here.
Very good. Virginia.
Here.
Katie, on behalf of the town, I see you there.
Morning here.
Morning, thank you. David, good morning.
Morning, here.
Bob, good morning.
Morning, here.
Tim for the Department of Health, how are you?
Morning, here, present.
Very good, thank you. Rick.
Here.
Very good. Bill.
Present.
Tina.
Here.
Adam.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Very good. And Greg, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Is there anyone else that I have missed?
Adam, I just want to let you know that you have 3 attendees. Cindy Gonzalez, Maureen Callahan from Representative Garlick's office, and Rick Merson, the director of DPW.
Very good. Thank you to the attendees for participating, for coming this morning, and thank you to all of our members and town staff. This open meeting of the Needham Council of Economic Advisors is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. It is being convened through the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, which spells out how the public may gain access. Some attendees are here via that video conference. Public access does not ensure that there will be public participation unless required by law. This particular meeting will not have public comment. Please also be aware that others may be able to see you. Anything that you share or state will be captured by the recording and will become a matter of public record. All supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda and the previous minutes, are available on the town's website at needhamma.gov, unless otherwise noted. A few ground rules. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to allow for an accurate public record. I'll introduce each of the speakers on our agenda. After they conclude their remarks, each board member will be, or council member will be, asked by name for any comment, questions, or motions. For all of us, please make sure that you mute your phone or your device when you're not speaking. Please speak clearly and in a way that helps assure accurate public minutes, minute taking. Please wait until recognized by name, and please also state your name again before you speak so we can accurately convey who's speaking for the minutes. And finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be by roll call vote. With that, Lee, good morning. Good to see you, and thank you for coming.
Good morning.
The first item on our agenda are the minutes of our last meeting from May 13th. I've had an opportunity to review them. I discussed them with Daphne. There were some slight minor modifications. Has anybody else had any other comments? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 13?
So move.
Thank you very much. Oh, David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just not clear. You said there's some changes that they have already been made in the draft that we've, okay.
Yes, there were some minor modifications.
Got it. But we've seen the final version, or no?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Daphne, for coordinating that. Can I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Very good. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Stu, I don't see is present this morning. Glenn? Glenn, you're muted. We're going to call the roll. Glenn, can you hear me?
Oh.
How about a thumbs up?
On mute.
Yeah, a thumbs up for approval. So we'll regard that as an affirmative. Very good. Thank you. Bill?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mo?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Rick? Rick?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Tina?
Aye.
Very good. David Montgomery?
Aye.
Very good. Virginia?
Aye.
Very good. Adam Meixner?
Aye.
Very good. And Mike Wilcox?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you very much. I declare the minutes of our May meeting passed. The core reason to get together, of course, is to just continue to keep each other apprised of what's happening with the rollout of the reopening for the state and in particular our town. And I have asked Greg and Tim to be here and to participate because Greg's perspective for the whole of the chamber across Newton and Needham can be informative about what's happening for business. And Tim, of course, who's rolling out our health practices to ensure that we reopen safely. So first of all, we're now firmly into phase 2. And I know we discussed previously that the town was going to adopt a policy of easing some restrictions for business. In particular, that really started to with a view to help restaurants at the time before other businesses were opening up. And now other businesses are opening up. I know that when I've driven through the town, I've seen a lot of people on the commons and other grounds being able to take out their food and enjoy it and have a glass of wine or a beer. I think that's been a very positive experience. Tina, have you seen or experienced other challenges? What have you seen with your business on the brick and mortar side?
I think it's been a little slow for some people, most of us, just sort of getting the communication out that people are opening. And, certainly businesses are facing challenges because they have to limit the number of people that are in their stores. After every visit, there has to be there's sanitation and cleaning protocol that has to be followed. But I think it's slowly, everybody was sort of testing the waters last week. And from what I've heard from my neighbors and colleagues, so far, so good.
Good. Have you seen at all an uptick in street traffic, pedestrian traffic, walking the streets?
Definitely cars, but I would say, street traffic's been sort of holding steady just because that's really this is the only area where people have been allowed to walk around. So whether they're just walking for leisure or actually patronizing any businesses, I haven't really noticed any significant difference.
Greg, have any of your other members noticed an increase in brick and mortar activity just in this last week as a result of more people being out and walking around?
Well, Adam, I don't know that I've had that conversation with anyone whether there's more people walking in the street. I did want to correct you on one thing though, that
Please.
We're actually only firmly in phase 2, part 1.
Right.
That's only a partial part of what phase 2 allows.
Right. Thank you very much for the clarification. I appreciate that. And so what other challenges are you are your members facing on the retail side? Are they able to get Greg and Tina, appropriate sanitizing material, for instance?
I think everybody, yeah. I mean, I haven't heard. We've all sort of worked together to figure out resources. Supplies seem to be freely flowing at this point. A lot of people have hired cleaning companies to come in and do deep cleans. So there was a lot of scrambling before that first day of phase 2, just to make sure that everybody was prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I had talked about curbside parking for a couple of these businesses who are not fully ready to open their doors, and a couple of spots have been designated, so that's been helpful. I've been talking with Jerry Michelson quite a bit about helping him out, getting that sorted out, because he's not actually allowing people in the shop right. Well, a few days ago, he wasn't allowing people in the shop. So, we're all trying to figure it out, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be a slow, I think, process.
Right.
Because it's not just the businesses being prepared, but it's also convincing consumers that it's, that we're open and it's their comfort level. So we're all still, for the most part, offering curbside. We're all still offering home delivery. Everybody's websites who have them are still up and running. And so people are still shipping. I'm still doing home drop-offs throughout Needham and Newton and Wellesley. So, we also have to work with our clients to make sure that they are ready to come back.
Right. Greg, did you want to add anything there?
Anecdotally, I hear that hand sanitizing wipes are difficult for many people to find. But in general, PPE and signage and those things are all just part of what people are adapting to right now.
Right. And has Newton already opened up the street side, curbside parking? Not parking, but eating and also shopping, like displays on the sidewalks and so on.
So Newton does allow merchants to put merchandise on the sidewalk. And they did open up or create a policy to allow restaurants to expand onto the sidewalk, even if they hadn't had a permit to do that before, all within the proper social distancing guidelines. Sounds very much like what Needham has empowered the town manager to do, but Newton did do that right away as of, I guess, a week ago today when it was first allowed. It was in place for that. There are, I think, about 40 restaurants in Newton that have been kind of cleared to do outdoor serving of one sort or another. I may have that number wrong, but it's quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Good. And have they experienced challenges other than obviously finance and having enough customers?
Well, so I think, Adam, you're asking the question a little prematurely. The weekend was really the test for everybody. I'm sure it was the test for retailers, and I'm sure it's a test for restaurants. So I don't know that I haven't heard, being that it's 9 o'clock on Monday morning, how people's weekend was.
Right.
But certainly I know driving around both Newton and Needham, I saw people out and about, but it's really too early to say whether that translated into any substantial business or not.
Okay. Rick, I see your hand up.
One of the things I've noticed, and Tina, you can speak to this, anyone trying to sell clothing, you can't really try it on. You can't, and I walked into the pro shop at the Needham Golf Club and was looking at a couple of shirts. I said, well, if you want to try it on, but you have to buy it. You can't, or a golf glove or anything. If it doesn't fit, it's too bad. You have to buy it. So that takes some getting used to.
Yeah, I'm sure that's. Tina, go ahead.
I mean, so the workaround for a lot of us is, well, we can still do online, right? We can still do curbside. So I've been sending a lot of merchandise out. It's a strange rule because they can come back and they can send it back to me. But I think people are trying to figure out how to manage that. I know a couple stores, I was in touch with a lot of people on Saturday. We were all just sort of texting each other, and it was hit or miss. Some people did pretty well. some people didn't. As Greg said, it was the first weekend, so we'll see how it plays out.
Right. And I know that Needham is moving, towards the same direction. Greg, you referenced some recent news that that the town has empowered the town manager to be able to take to broaden the protocols to allow for more outdoor commercial activity and including on-street parking and so on. So hopefully we'll start to see that tick up over the course of this week. And we'll have some more information for next meeting about how that's going.
I'd say that the selectmen took a very important step. There are lots of restaurants that can't be accommodated in their sidewalk right in front of their store. It's not wide enough, or there's not enough space for the proper social distancing and handicap requirement. So really, this is a great opportunity for us to experiment with closing a parking space, closing part of a parking lot. And these are ideas that have been part of good kind of downtown development for years. And here we have an opportunity to really try them while there's a little less foot traffic and people are a little more patient and tolerant. So hopefully we'll see some of those things happening really quickly. And I actually, if someone could clarify, I don't know whether the regulations have been relaxed to allow merchants to put merchandise on the sidewalk. Has Needham acted on that? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, we may get back to you, but Mo, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I don't think we've taken a specific action with respect to putting merchandise on the sidewalk, but I think the intent is to, as long as 4 feet is left for pedestrian handicapped access, 48 inches, I think there'll be a high degree of tolerance. Mary Ann Cooley and I met with several of the restaurateurs in the Chapel Street lot on Saturday. We met with Rice Barn, the Bagels Best, Cook, and Gary. It was casual. We went to check out Rice Barn because we would need to limit some of his access if not Kit Cooks, the James could have a better seating arrangement. And we explored taking parking spaces for Cooks and Bagels Best. We think we can do that. Gary is talking about putting tables out in the walkway between Great Plain and the Chapel Street lot, and there's enough room that's 12 feet wide. There's a high degree of cooperation among the merchants. It was very good to hear the restaurateurs talk to each other about helping each other a little bit. A major issue for us is trying to get that dumpster temporarily relocated because of the servicing aspects of it. Cooks, which is not part of that dumpster collaborative, wants to be in on it. So we'll be looking at that as well. Mary Ann is leading the effort for the town on that committee. But we're meeting regularly and talking to the restaurants, and some of the other merchants are free to contact us if they have ideas. And that's through Sandy Sincata in the town manager's office. But this is a time, we look at this as a time to experiment. And the planning board has been very flexible about its approach to all of these things because of special permitting requirements. They've given the town broad authority to work with these.
That's right. Thank you very much. I know that it's it's not easy trying to deal with relaxing some of the restrictions on the one hand and getting collaboration among businesses on the other hand. But hopefully these efforts are we're going to improve our own kind of condition here.
I know Rick Merson is listening.
Yes.
But we need to look at that dumpster. We've got to find a way to temporarily move that dumpster. And if we can get it further away from the restaurant, so much the better. But the issue there is trucks maneuvering to empty the dumpster or dumpsters. And that creates a difficult situation. So you'll be hearing from us probably through Tony with respect to the dumpster.
Thank you. The state, I think, passed recently a $5 million fund to help municipalities make improvements to facilitate more commercial activity. I don't know, is that something that Needham is able to participate in? or needs to participate in? Has that been discussed at all?
We've been looking at grant opportunities. So if anybody's aware of any that we may have missed, don't hesitate to let Sandy know. She's the point person on this, and she's been turning these applications around as fast as she can.
I think that,
Go ahead, Lee.
I think the town is aware of that particular grant program. And I think one of the things we were looking at was we're talking about putting Jersey berries into the parking lots to create a secure environment, or using them along the street to actually provide access to the parking spaces themselves. So that was one avenue for funding. I know was being considered by Mary Ann.
That's great. Thank you very much.
And we've already placed several barriers in the Chapel Street lot.
And is this the phase where offices can open up with I guess up to 25% capacity? Is that right, Tim? I think you're shaking your head.
Yes, most offices can open back with 25% capacity. There are some restrictions, but for example, Needham Town buildings have opened back up. We have a control plan and we have assurances that are in place. And when there needs to be more than 25%, we have to sort of justify it from a public health perspective and get sign off from the public health department. But all town buildings are open by appointment only with approximately 25% staff.
Right. When do you expect the next round of office staff being increasing?
So I think that's an open question. The state has indicated somewhat unofficially that they don't expect the 25% to necessarily change. They expect more industries to open, not necessarily that more people will be allowed in phase 3, but they haven't officially put that in writing, as best I remember. I think it also largely depends on whether Massachusetts sees, there's a number of states I think people know that are being heavily affected by coronavirus right now, and some of them are states that had been on the road to recovery that have relapsed. So I think it's a question on whether Massachusetts numbers keep progressing in a positive way. The numbers have all been trending down, which is great. If that continues, then I think hopefully during phase 3, more industries will open, and then with phase 4, it would be closer to full capacity.
And are restaurants designed to open up at reduced capacity for inside eating in phase 3 or at a later stage of phase 2?
Adam, phase 2, part 2 would presumably include indoor dining. But just to back up to your previous question first, office spaces have been allowed to be open for almost a month now. Many have chosen not to, which is why you're seeing not as much traffic, and really people have continued to work from home in many instances. TripAdvisor, for example, has told everyone they will be closed essentially until the fall, and that's true for a lot of other offices in the office parks and elsewhere. Really, and that's going to impact, going back to your earlier question about restaurant traffic and everything else. It certainly impacts what happens at lunchtime and spending in various places. Restaurants will, when they reopen, be on a very limited capacity as well. It's going to be really tough for small restaurants to seat the number of people that they need to be profitable, or even to justify their staff in some cases. And part of that is because of the social distancing. And you think of those small spaces, it's even finding places where you can put tables 6 feet apart is going to be really tricky.
That's true. Thank you. Adam, what's your experience with with leasing and with sales generally in the area for office space? What's the demand like and the supply?
Yeah, so the first few months were, from March until like mid to late May, it was just crickets, like 0 tours, hardly any calls. It is what it is. The last week in May is when like the phones started ringing or emails started coming in with, people asking about, availability or touring potentially. And I'd say like the last 2 weeks, knock on wood, have actually been quite busy in terms of tour volume. Both, tenant representation for us showing, actually multiple buildings, or just, letting various tenants in to look at spaces. It seems like people are kind of at the point where they can't really kick the can that much longer if they have like a lease expiring, let's say in, 5 to 7 or 8 months, basically. If it's longer than that, then I think it's, people are typically waiting a little bit longer to see, how this unfolds further and, get a bigger set of data in terms of how their, workers are doing remotely. But I'd say it's certainly starting to pick up on the leasing side. In terms of, sales, it's still a little bit slow. A bunch of the stuff that we're selling right now are more like user sales. And I just don't think that people have the confidence in their business. And by that, I mean, they know how many people are actually going to be coming, to the office on a daily basis to a point where it makes sense for them to actually execute and, buy something, which is not permanent, but it's more permanent than just leasing. So.
Right. Yes, Rick.
Adam, I got a question for you. Are you starting to see any traffic from historically downtown financial district, Back Bay type tenants?
Rick, the only tenants that are really calling us are in your buildings right now, trying to get out of them. So.
I can tell you that certainly is not the case.
I'm just teasing you. We've seen a couple, more so brokers reaching out, like downtown brokers reaching out to find out about availability. Maybe not for like long-term transactions, meaning 5, 7, or 10-year leases, but more so Band-Aid type situations where, it may be a sublet that we have and someone wants to pick it up for a year or a year and a half while keeping their office downtown. But there have been some like direct inquiries for, longer term spaces, but more so it's shorter term at this point. So
for better or worse, as we all have been on various Zoom meetings, I've been on a number of Zoom webinars with a lot of the pundits of commercial real estate who are all predicting that the downtown Seaport District, Back Bay, the big office users down there are probably for social distancing, for the amount of rent that they have to pay to keep those offices open, are maybe looking for more suburban type offices, maybe keeping a much less square footage in those downtown areas as a flagship for customer relations and meetings with clients and things like that, but that the bulk of the work might start getting done in the suburbs, which I got to believe that, Adam, that you can't wait to happen.
Yeah, no, fortunately we cover the suburban market here, so we're not, quite as concerned as being, a downtown broker. Fortunately for the downtown landlords, a lot of these companies have long-term leases in place, right, that they can't just abandon. So, I think initially what we'll probably start seeing is a lot of those companies opening like satellite locations for those people that aren't comfortable, for those employees that aren't comfortable with riding, the public transportation into the city for obvious reasons. That's the biggest, complaint or concern, I should say, that we're hearing from, various surveys and, discussions that we've been reading or hearing about or listening in on. But yeah, I think it's, if someone has, one thing to keep in mind though is if a tenant has 10,000 square feet downtown, right? And the norm now, or the trend right now is, up until COVID, is kind of like jamming people in there and doing like bench style seating where everybody's 2 feet apart, right? That doesn't fly anymore. It can't fly. So, if you have half your staff that's going to be working remotely for the next, let's say, 6 to 60 months or whatever, just because they're just not comfortable with going back into the city, and you take space out in the burbs, you're not going to just give back half of your space, right? Because you need to spread people out. So if you were in 10,000 feet, instead of going to 5,000, you may go to, 7,500 or 8,000, but it's still a huge savings because downtown you could be paying 50, 60, 70 bucks a foot, right? Versus out in the burbs, $30, $40 a square foot is kind of like the max, I would say, that you see in some of like the Class A buildings. So
one of the other things I've heard about downtown buildings that are actually not something that you have to really worry about suburban buildings is that in downtown towers, the lower level spaces are now in the highest demand because of the limitations of the number of people you can put in an elevator, which causes people to get to work and then have to wait 15, 20 minutes to be able to get on an elevator to go up to their space up on the upper floor because of those limitations. So
yeah, I mean, that's a huge challenge. I think that's the other, like the second, biggest topic that's being discussed because you can really fit only, let's say, I think they're maxing out at 4 people in an elevator. And if you're trying to go into, I don't know, International Place or One Financial or something like that, and you're on the 40th floor, there's a lot of people that are going into that building, even at 25% right now. I mean, we're hearing about some delays. I've heard that it's almost like Disney World where you're trying to get on a ride where they have like it roped off so that you can get in line, but you obviously need to be 6 feet apart. So there are some, buildings that may have people lining out the door basically. But getting up to your suite could be a challenge, especially if you're on that, higher floor there. I mean, even if you're, on floor like six plus is a challenge. I mean, going up 6 flights of stairs is a lot for people. And, keep in mind, obviously with disabilities and everything, I'm assuming, I haven't, dug into this, but I'm assuming there's, a certain elevator that lets them bypass it if they can't take the stairs and everything. But that's going to be a real challenge. And it's only at 25% right now, but we're already hearing that it is taking some time to get up there. Which, yeah, to your point, Rick, in the suburban office buildings, most of them are, less than 5 stories. And in some cases, you can literally just walk into your suite from the parking lot, right? And then traffic's the other thing that goes along with the MBTA. If these people don't want to ride on the subways and the buses, they have the opportunity to drive, the option to drive into the city. But traffic's already so bad going into the city. And then once you get there, where do you park? And how do you afford it if you don't have a big salary or your company's not going to pick up the bill for it? So that's another reason why some of these suburban landlords are pretty bullish on everything, or I should say not as scared as some of the downtown landlords. I mean, we've spoken to some landlords that own properties both downtown and the suburbs, and they're being very cautious about downtown, but they feel pretty good about the suburbs.
Sounds like being diversified in that way is the best approach, but because what we had been hearing for years, Rick, we heard this, and Mike, you were with us as well when we were doing some of the meetings with the CDC, not the CDC, but the Cambridge Innovation Center. That so many businesses downtown were downtown because they wanted to attract that younger, demographic of employees that really want to, be in the city, as opposed to having to, work out in the suburbs. And so they're going to have to reverse that commute and come out to the suburbs, as offices open up, which will be a bit of an opposite commute scenario, reverse commute.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, that's why a lot of, tenant or businesses want to be downtown, because access to the talent pool, most of those, people that are living, or, students, recent graduates that are living downtown, and it's easy for them to get to. But a lot of them also, we have to keep in mind, are, rely on technology. And some of them, as of right now, I mean, we've seen some surveys indicate, or studies indicate, that they're fine with working remotely, right? And they're, claiming they're more efficient and everything. And, but I mean, I think they have the ability to work, remotely, but I think they're going to, starting to miss, the camaraderie and seeing their, friends at the office and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out and, what these businesses actually end up doing if they do, if a lot of them do move to the suburbs, or, they just stay downtown and, limit how many people are coming in. I mean, I think in the long term, though, downtown will be fine, once they come up with a vaccine and everything. But I mean, it's until then, who knows what's going on and, how long it's going to be. So.
To find the silver lining in all of this that's going on, I think Newton and Needham, because they're not way out suburbs, have an opportunity to benefit from an office standpoint. It's not a long commute to get to Newton or Needham, and I think you may be finding a certain population of millennials deciding that, for what I'm paying for rent downtown, maybe I can buy a house out in the burbs and pay less than what I'm paying for an apartment.
It's true.
I mean, Newton and Needham are so well insulated compared to, most of the rest of the market. If you look, way further north or further south, I mean, there's so many C-level executives that are living out in this neck of the woods already. So it's a easy commute for them, and now they can justify having their office a mile from their house instead of driving into the city. But it's also so centrally located too, so they can pull people from the north, south, and the east, and like you said, Rick, it's not far from Boston at all. So,
Greg, I saw you shaking your head in agreement.
Well, I'm shaking my head in agreement in that we certainly are in a good position to have companies think about our real estate. But I'll tell you that there's one issue that really I think should be foremost in everyone's mind, that we will not get people back into offices in any substantial number until we find a way to get daycare, childcare going again, not to mention schools open again. So many people really need to find a place for their kids in order to return to work. It is, in my mind, really the biggest challenge that we face with reopening. The childcare regulations, the preliminary ones that are out there, which actually were part of phase 2, part 1, make it almost impossible for any childcare to open. We are seeing some private day camps that are going to open, but the limits that they have, meaning the providers, on terms of the number of campers or infants or toddlers or whoever they can take, are really restrictive and going to make it really impossible. So I think that you need to worry about that for the office workers, and you really need to worry about it for these childcare providers, which is, of course, a big segment of our economy as well. They are really not going to be able to bring kids back in the numbers they were used to before. That's going to challenge their model. They already work on razor thin margins. And until we have a way to get a place to take care of our children, and that includes, of course, schools in the fall, we are not going to be able to bring people back to the offices in large numbers.
Greg, I just wanted to second that. My wife's actually in that business, and in the regulations, it states explicitly, we understand that some of you will not be able to open under these conditions. I mean, the state has just told them flat out that they've created a situation which is just untenable. So I couldn't agree with you more that it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed soon. And during the conversation with Rick and Adam, I was also thinking, I think the real stumbling block to all of this stuff, I think there are benefits to the suburbs. I concur with everything that was said. But until we get daycare and schools open again, you're not going to get people back to work. I think what's most tragic about this too is if you really think about it, there's an article in the New York Times about this. This could set working women back almost a generation, because the schools don't open. It's probably going to be the mom that stays home, not the dad. And you're talking about careers that are being destroyed here. And you think about the retailers; they're mostly run by women. Hair salons, nail salons. So there's some real socioeconomic damage, permanent damage that's being done here. And I think this notion of just kind of, let's wait and see, see where things go. It's not good enough, quite frankly.
And if I could just say, the other risk you may see is you may see unregulated childcare happening. People are going to have to find some place for their kids, so somebody down the street will take in, a group of kids, and then you have unregulated, unlicensed situations. And I think when the town is looking for what it can do, I think we need to be able to have conversations with our childcare providers. In some cases, because they don't physically have enough space, maybe there's some public spaces available for them to use. And really, we need to pay a lot of attention to really what's happening here and trying to find solutions. The same way we're trying to find solutions for individual restaurants to expand, we may want to have those same conversations with individual providers.
Well, and we've been told from the outset that we're supposed to pay attention to the data and the science, and it's clear that this is not something that affects children. There have been 0 deaths in the state under the age of 19. Average age of death is 82, and 98.5% of all deaths have had a comorbidity. So it's pretty obvious to where we should be spending our efforts in terms of social distancing and addressing the solution. And it's not with children. Of course, there's teachers, I understand, and there are common sense, practical protections that can be put in place. But, I say an education postponed is an education denied. I mean, how are children possibly ever going to catch up? You've probably all read the same articles I have that, generally speaking, remote learning was not a good experiment. And again, in terms of the socioeconomic impact, it hit the hardest hit communities the worst. Kids that don't have access to technology, kids that don't have parents at home tending to them. So this isn't something that can go on. This needs to, come fall, we need to get the kids back in school because they'll never catch up at this rate.
So I think it's important.
Hold on 1 second. Mo had his hand up. And
I was going to defer to Tim because I think there's some evidence that kids carry. So I think that's part of the concern. I agree that it's with Bob's concern also. I mean, it's devastating.
It is. I think there's evidence that the kids are a vector for transmission. I think there's a difference between, there's been a small number, but certainly when you're talking to parents, even a small number is a cause for concern of children that have developed fairly significant non-injuries that are different to what adults are facing. So young adults have developed something that's somewhat like Kawasaki syndrome. Younger children, again in small numbers, but not in the hundreds, have developed sort of a multi-systemic inflation that affects internal organs that have had serious long-term consequences. I think the challenge when we think about the steps we've taken, for example, for town office buildings, is there's fairly simple steps we can take, like limiting the total number of people in a building, like having plexiglass barriers and 6-foot step backs, like having separation, that are far easier to implement in an adult working population than it is to implement with children of virtually any age. I sit on a couple of the superintendent's working groups in his advisory committee, and a lot of schools are tackling the challenge of how do they get kids back and sort of what scenarios are they able to prepare for, because as Bob mentioned, the guidance for daycares and for camps is quite challenging. And many have, not all, but many have sort of said, we can't go forward like this, or we don't have a plan right now. Schools are trying hard to not do the same thing, but it is a real challenge because a lot of what we can do for adults to make sure adults are safe is not easily replicable amongst students and children.
I know that it's been very challenging with dealing with kids and dealing with school and dealing with work. We're dealing with it in my own household, and it's been very challenging for sure. And we've heard mixed things from different towns, that different schools may go on different rotating schedules. So students may go back to school physically in school for a couple of days a week, for instance, and then continue the balance remotely online. It's obviously something that it's going to affect all of us, and it's going to be a critical part, like both what Bob, you were saying, and also Greg, what you were saying, and how businesses are able to return, both in terms of retail and office. The lab space, I think that, Mike, are you able to speak a little bit about what's happening with lab space?
Lab space seems to be probably the use group that has been less impacted by the pandemic. Cambridge activity is still good. Watertown activity is good. Inner suburb activity still remains. People are signing deals going forward. There has been some space come back, but that's just due to business with those particular firms and nothing specific to the pandemic per se. So obviously a number of firms in the Boston area are working on COVID related research as well. So, some people see that it may be a bright spot and otherwise a dark period that we're going through now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. We've moved through quite a bit of our agenda. There were a few other items. What I had put down the farmers market on our agenda previous. Oh, Greg, go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing. In terms of the different segments we've talked about, first of all, I'm not advocating doing anything that's not safe. Doesn't apply to safety standards regarding childcare. Only stressing that really that's going to be a key factor to restarting the economy. But another factor that's really going to struggle here are our health and fitness clubs. Again, it's another big economic segment. We have a lot of them in town, and probably more than you think of, because some of them are kind of small and tucked away. But their regulations, which are not out yet, they are part of phase 3, are also going to make it really tough for those businesses to continue in many cases. And again, I think we need to be concerned about it from a health standard, but also for the future of those businesses and those employees. That's all.
Thank you. I think one of the big challenges is knowing some landlords that have gym tenants, both fairly locally and also in other states, has been cardio activity. A lot of people, as the weather's improved, have been able to do their cardio activity outside. They're not able to do it as in large groups and like spin classes and so on. But some people, you'll see groups of 3, 4, 5 riders together. Some people will run together. Some people will run on their own and find the outdoors for their cardio activity. And yet the challenge has been, if you're using equipment that you don't otherwise have at home for weight training and that kind of thing, that's been a real challenge, because how do you regulate how many people that can go into the gym, clean it in enough time to get more people to come in? It's definitely been a real struggle. And I know other states have opened their gyms. And I think that's been a real health concern, because it's it's a locus for spread and contagion. So not an easy one at all. I think you're quite right. I mean, there are a lot of businesses around here that are in that space. I had put the farmers market on the agenda because they hadn't obviously been open for a bit, and now they have. I think was this past weekend the first weekend of the farmers market when I walked through it.
They were open this weekend,
and everything went as had been planned, I think.
Very low density. I think when they opened initially at noon, there was some waiting, but we were there 1:30 or 2, and it was very, very few vendors, not a lot of people.
Okay, good. Well, we hope that recovers. I know that we went through quite a bit to try and accommodate the farmers market to return, and hopefully more people, as they're out and about in the over the coming several weeks into the summer, we'll have the confidence to be able to, support our local vendors at the farmers market.
I think people didn't know they were open. For example, their sign said from Memorial Day to Labor Day, or I forget what the end point is, but they implied that it opened on Memorial Day, and they didn't open on Memorial Day. So I think people may have been confused.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as time goes by, things should pick up a little.
Good. Turning to our industrial zoning, there are a few updates with Highway Commercial 1. Lee, do you want to chat a little bit about the town meeting and the approval for some funding for traffic studies?
Yeah, so at town meeting, there was a warrant article that basically gave the planning board an appropriation, I think, of $60,000, which they can use on planning studies. And I think that these funds will be used initially to advance the Highway Commercial 1 zoning. I think we're still trying to sort out how to manage the foundational piece, which is the traffic analysis, which is the sector upon which the urban design plan, the fiscal impact study ultimately will sit. And I think we're probably going to need to look at utilizing existing traffic data. There was some data that was collected by the state as part of the Adeline project, as-built data. So we have information on the Highland Avenue, Gould Street intersection that was collected prior to COVID-19. The town did some counts on Central Avenue, at the intersection of Central Avenue and Gould Street, which could be utilized. I think originally we had hoped to do a complete traffic study from scratch and use that as a foundational piece, but it's going to be a long time, I think everybody understands, before the traffic is up to any sense of normality that can be modeled for these purposes. So that's, the monies were appropriated, and I think we're sorting out next steps on that. The other big win at town meeting was the zoning change for Children's Hospital, which essentially allows, change the zoning to allow the land use in the district by special permit, and established a parking standard for the use. I believe Children's is looking at coming into the planning board to amend their special permit to begin to implement that. The enablement for that zoning with the construction of, I think, the first building next to the TripAdvisor building. So I think those were the two major signature pieces that happened at town meeting on the planning side.
Thank you very much. And then the other note that I had for the area was IDG taking over the PTC space, bringing 600 employees ultimately back to the area, and over there 125,000 square feet of office space, with a slow move to begin around the beginning of January 2021, if I remember that correctly. But I think that's great. We'll see what happens now as a result of the coronavirus, but that certainly was a good, a great get, so to speak, to replace the PTC. Yes, Mike, go ahead.
So there's not all the PTC space. There still is availability in that building. And unfortunately, on the downside, I don't know if people are aware, but TripAdvisor has gone to market with about 100,000 square feet of their building on the sublease market. So the top 2 floors of that building are being marketed for sublease right now.
Wow.
So you get one, you kind of lose one, but
yeah, exactly.
Hopefully it will add to the diversity of the tenant base out here, with bringing in some new users, both at the Trip building as well as the remainder of the PTC building. We had an owners meeting a couple weeks ago, and I had an opportunity to talk to a representative from Boston Properties, and they are planning sort of a repositioning of that building. He didn't provide a lot of details, but that building and the Trip building have cafes that have not been open to the public. So we're hoping that, in connection with Trip being a multi-tenant building, and then PTC being the same, that we can just create more amenities out here, which of course is what we're always looking to accomplish.
No, go ahead.
Just two questions, and this is also for you and Lee. First question is, what is the rental rate anticipated to be in the TripAdvisor building? Just curious. Do you know?
Early numbers, and the sublease transactions aren't necessarily market per se, because they're obviously just looking to offset an expense. But in talking to the brokers representing it, they're going to be looking for something in the 40s on a gross basis, which is, as Adam would attest to, is sort of the upper end of our market here right now. Whether they'll get it, whether there'll be a lot of free rent, what kind of TI that they need, tenant improvement work they need to do, those are all other components of the deal as well.
Thank you. And then the question for Lee and Adam is, our special permits in that area have precluded public, not public patronage so much as letting the public know they can eat in those cafeterias. I think it would be a good time to relook at that. Speaking as a citizen, not as a member of the select board. So I just throw that into your laps for thinking about and talking amongst yourselves.
Sure, I think the planning board can have another conversation on that.
I agree. That makes sense. And Mike, thanks for bringing that up, because the town has gone through quite an effort, first with restaurants and also with retail, to help the downtown. And I think that there is, perhaps some opportunities like you're talking about for the, commercial space, for the office space market, and certainly in our, in the New England Business Center area, Needham Crossing. David, go ahead.
Thanks. I was earlier in this meeting, Adam and Rick were giving voice to the tenant situation in downtown Boston, and asking them, posing the question about whether that was an opportunity for some of those tenants to move out here. And I'm just wondering if the IDG's move from the west to here is a counter argument, or that we should be thinking about, to the extent we have anything to do with it. Should we be positioning ourselves to attract more tenants moving east? Or was this more driven by IDG's own research of what they needed? It was a one-off. There's no general trend to point to here.
I think part of it was driven. They were in their location out west for many years, and I think they were in a couple buildings as well. So they wanted to, bring everybody together under one roof, as I say. And there's only so many buildings that can accommodate that, square footage. So I think that certainly helped with driving them towards, to Needham. But it's also, they want to be a little bit closer to attract that, younger talent, if you will, from the suburbs, in hopes that they'll be able to, get some. I mean, it worked for TripAdvisor. They were able to, get people to come over there. So I think the PTC campus is one has enough energy and is, shiny enough, I guess, to attract some more people. But it'll be TBD, but I think that, the spaces they were in I think it was Framingham, were rather dated, and rather than try to live through a construction zone, they made the decision to, go forward and, move into new space that's done for them, basically. So.
Thanks.
Greg, go ahead.
So in addition to everything that Adam said, which sounds right on, IDG has a new executive, and that's often what happens when you get new leadership coming in. They reposition and rethink where they're going. So it's a number of factors.
Thank you. Lee was able to cover off our next item on the agenda, relevant items before town meeting. So Lee, thank you for that. Are there recently issued permits, business permits?
In terms of the planning board, we're processing some business-related permits, although the volume is down. SPIGA's in front of both the ZBA and the planning board to provide for some outdoor seating. And that's on the planning board agenda for Tuesday, and I believe it's on the ZBA agenda for Thursday. They had gotten a permit a number of years ago to enlarge their outdoor seating capacity and never exercised it. So this is just almost a refiling of that. They are proposing a tent-like structure for their seating. So that's the first time we'd actually have a tent structure in a permanent way. The seating would be outdoors for, I think, 9 months of the year. They were talking about putting some space heater provisions there. So that's the only commercial permit. We're processing a couple of residential applications currently, but we recently finished the farmer's market. But we anticipate, I think the next big one will be Children's Hospital.
Thank you.
And on the zoning side, just as what Lee mentioned, we have that project, but last month they approved the special permit for the police and fire telecommunications tower. And again, something very interesting, every month since the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit was passed, we've had a lot of inquiries, and about each month we have one application coming forward. So we've issued our first one, and we have our second one this month, and their inquiries for one in July. So that's been an interesting need that's being taken care of by a zoning change.
Good, thank you. Next on the agenda is an update on the status of the recruitment for the Economic Development Manager position. Katie or Lee, do you want to speak to that at all?
I'll let Katie take this one.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. I've not met everyone, but I'm Katie King, the new Assistant Town Manager. And I think I met people briefly on our last call. So we have started round 1 interviews for the Economic Development Manager position. Thank you to Adam and Mo and Lee on this call who participated in that. Also Rachel Glisper from our HR department and Cindy Roy Gonzalez, our communications director. So we are continuing round 1. I hope we can get through round 1 and round 2 by the end of the month. I guess I'd just say, I think we have a really great talent pool. And so I'm hopeful that, and I feel confident that our candidate is in the group. So that's the status, and hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have something more.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's exciting and encouraging. In terms of other business, does anybody have anything they wish to add? Okay. The next item is an adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you very much. And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll for our motion to adjourn. Glenn.
Aye.
Mo.
Yes.
Virginia.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
Bill.
Aye.
Adam.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
David.
Aye.
Tina.
Yes.
Excellent. And I am an aye as well. I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much, everyone, and we'll look forward to resuming in July again with further updates. If anyone has any updates they want to, if anyone has any updates, please feel free to give them to either myself or Daphne.
The next meeting is July 8th, and so everybody have a wonderful month.
That'll be my birthday. Perfect. Thank you very much, Daphne and Clay, for organizing. I appreciate everyone being able to facilitate and taking the time today. Thank you all very much.
Take care. Best of all.
Bye-bye.